My parents took my children and did not give them back for 6 months and turned them against me. I sued them and got them back. When I left my husband, it wasn't a decision I made lightly. Our marriage had been crumbling for years, but the final straw came when his verbal outbursts became something I couldn't shield my children from. They were too young to understand the shouting, the accusations, the tension that filled every corner of our home, but I knew they felt it. I couldn't let them grow up in that environment, so I made the hardest decision of my life. I left. With nowhere else to go, I turned to my parents, hoping they could provide a safe, stable environment for my children while I figured out what to do next. I told myself it was temporary, just a few months to find a job, secure an apartment, and finalize the divorce. At first, everything seemed fine. My parents welcomed the children with open arms, showering them with love and attention. I was grateful, and for a while it felt like I'd made the right choice. The kids were happy, playing in the backyard I'd grown up in, while I spent my days juggling work and meetings with my lawyer. But beneath the surface, cracks were forming. My parents began to offer unsolicited advice on how to raise the kids, questioning my choices and suggesting that maybe I wasn't as capable as I thought I was. I brushed it off and chalked it up to being overprotective. After all, they were just trying to help, right? I had no idea what I was in for. As the months went by, the tension grew. My parents began to set strange limits. They insisted that I couldn't visit the kids during the week because it would disrupt their routine. Weekends also became off limits for equally flimsy reasons. When I called, the children often sounded hesitant, as if they were being coached. My daughter, usually bubbly and full of stories, gave me short, careful answers. My son barely spoke. It broke my heart, but whenever I voiced my concerns, my mother dismissed them. "You're imagining things," she said once, her voice laced with condescension. "You're just adjusting. You're the one who left, remember?" Her words stung. I'd left them with her because I trusted her, not because I didn't care. But something didn't add up. The first real red flag came when my daughter let something slip during a phone call. "Grandma says we're lucky to be here because you don't want us anymore," she said, her voice small and uncertain. My heart dropped. I felt a surge of anger, but I kept my tone calm. "That's not true," I said firmly. "You know I love you, right?" Before she could answer, my mother's voice cut in. "It's time for bed," she said sharply, and the line went dead. I sat there staring at my phone, my hands shaking. That was the moment I realized my parents weren't just helping, they were actively working against me. I couldn't ignore it anymore. My parents were deliberately driving a wedge between me and my children. The idea that they might be manipulating my children, filling their heads with lies about me, was both infuriating and devastating. I decided to confront them. The following weekend, I showed up unannounced. As soon as I walked through the door, I could feel the tension in the air. My kids looked at me, then quickly turned their attention back to the TV, as if they'd been told not to engage with me. "I need to talk to you," I said to my mother, trying to keep my voice calm. She crossed her arms and sighed, clearly annoyed. "We're in the middle of making dinner. Can't this wait?" "It can't," I said firmly. We stepped into the living room and my father joined us, standing behind her like a silent enforcer. "What's this about?" my mom asked, her tone icy. I didn't mince words. "The kids are telling me things you said about me. That I don't love them, that I left them because I didn't want them. What's going on?" My dad frowned, but it was my mom who spoke. "We're just being honest with them," she said coolly. "They deserve to know why their mother left them." Her words hit me like a punch. "I didn't abandon them," I shouted. "I trusted you to take care of them while I got my life together. And this is how you repay me?" My father stepped in, his voice deep and threatening. "Lower your voice. You're upsetting the kids." I realized then that they weren't going to back down. They saw themselves as the rightful guardians of my children, and they had no intention of letting them go. I left that day more determined than ever. If they were going to play dirty, I was going to fight back with everything I had. I couldn't sleep that night. My parents' betrayal gnawed at me, and the thought of my children being manipulated into thinking I didn't care about them kept me awake. I knew I couldn't let this go on. The next morning I began researching custody laws and contacting attorneys. It wasn't easy, money was tight, and I wasn't sure where to start. But after a few consultations, I found an attorney who seemed both competent and compassionate. As I explained the situation, she listened intently, her expression growing more serious with each word. "This isn't just a custody battle," she said. "It sounds like your parents are engaging in parental alienation. The courts don't look kindly on that." Her words gave me a ray of hope. For months I had felt powerless, but now I had someone on my side who knew how to navigate the system. Over the next few weeks, my lawyer helped me gather evidence. I compiled every text message and email exchange with my parents, highlighting their controlling behavior and refusal to let me see my children. I also documented the times my children mentioned being told lies about me. Meanwhile, I continued to reach out to my children. I called them every day, even if the conversations were short and tense. I wanted them to know that I was still here, still fighting for them, even if they didn't fully understand what was happening. The legal process was slow, but I felt a growing sense of determination. My parents had crossed a line, and I wasn't going to let them rewrite the history of my relationship with my children. As my legal preparations gained momentum, my relationship with my parents deteriorated. They seemed to sense that I wasn't going to back down, and their behavior became even more manipulative. One day I called my daughter during lunch and she whispered, "Grandma said you might not want to call us anymore. She said it's easier for everyone if we just stay here forever." My heart broke, but I remained calm. "I will always want to talk to you, sweetheart," I said quietly, knowing that my mother was probably hovering nearby, listening to every word. Shortly after that call, my parents stopped returning my phone calls altogether. When I visited their house, they wouldn't let me pass the front door, claiming the kids were busy with homework or too tired to see me. The final straw came when I received an email from my mother accusing me of being an unfit mother and threatening to seek full custody herself. She claimed that they provided the stable environment my children needed and implied that I was emotionally damaging them by insisting on visitation. That's when I knew this wasn't just a custody battle, it was a battle for my children's hearts and minds. With my attorney's guidance, I filed for custody and requested an emergency hearing. My parents fought back, of course. They painted a picture of me as irresponsible, unstable, and incapable of providing for my children. They even brought up my divorce, twisting it into evidence of my supposed unfitness as a parent. But I wasn't going to let them win. I knew the truth, and I was determined to make sure the court saw it, too. The day of the first trial felt surreal. As I sat in the courtroom and watched my parents testify against me, I could hardly believe what I was hearing. My own mother and father, the people who raised me, were now trying to paint me as a monster. "She was never reliable," my mother said, her voice calm and measured. "We've given these children the stability they need, and taking it away now would be harmful." My father nodded in agreement and added, "We've done everything for them. She left them here because she couldn't handle the responsibility." It took everything I had to stay calm. I wanted to scream, to shout that they were lying, but my lawyer had warned me not to react emotionally. Instead, I sat quietly, hands clenched in my lap, waiting for my turn. When it came, my lawyer presented our evidence: the messages, the denial of visits, and the alienating behavior. She pointed out the times my parents had lied to the children about me and highlighted the pattern of control they had exercised over me and my children. The judge listened intently, occasionally looking at me with a look I couldn't quite decipher. But the most powerful moment came when my daughter, in a private session with the judge, told the truth. "Grandma says Mommy doesn't want us anymore," she admitted. "But I don't think that's true. I miss her." Her words were both heartbreaking and affirming. For so long I had felt like I was fighting an uphill battle, but hearing that she still believed in me gave me strength. When the hearing ended, the judge announced that a full investigation would be conducted and temporarily ordered my parents to allow supervised visits. It wasn't the victory I was hoping for, but it was a start. The judge's decision to allow supervised visits felt like a small victory, but it was also a reminder of how much further I had to go. I took every opportunity during these visits to reconnect with my children, even as my parents hovered nearby, watching like hawks. At first, the visits were awkward. The children seemed hesitant, unsure if they could trust me after all they'd been told. My daughter asked tentative questions like, "Why don't you live with us anymore?" And, "Do you love us?" My son, who is quieter by nature, clung to her and avoided eye contact. I answered their questions honestly but gently, making sure they knew I was always there for them. Slowly I saw their walls come down. They began to laugh again, hugged me tightly when I arrived, and asked when they could come home. Meanwhile, my attorney and I worked tirelessly to strengthen my case. We brought in a child psychologist to assess the impact of my parents' behavior on the children. The psychologist's report was damning. It outlined clear evidence of alienation and manipulation, as well as the emotional damage it had caused my children. We also uncovered financial discrepancies in my parents' handling of the children's care. They had exaggerated their expenses to portray themselves as the primary caregivers, but bank records told a different story. My attorney presented these findings to the court at the next hearing. She argued passionately that my parents' actions weren't just controlling, they were harmful. "This is not about what's best for the children," she said. "This is about power and control." The judge seemed to take her seriously. He ordered an independent investigator to visit my parents' home and assess the situation. It was a crucial step in proving that I was the better parent for my children. The court-appointed investigator was a no-nonsense woman named Ms. Patel. She arrived unannounced at my parents' home one afternoon, taking them completely by surprise. I wasn't present during the visit, but I later learned from my lawyer that it was tense and revealing. Ms. Patel spent hours observing my parents' interactions with the children. She asked pointed questions about their routines, their schooling, and the boundaries my parents said they had set for the children's well-being. My daughter later confided in me that Ms. Patel had spoken to her privately. She asked if Grandma ever said bad things about you. My daughter said quietly during one of our supervised visits. "I told her yes. She seemed nice, so I told her everything." This admission was both heartbreaking and hopeful. It meant that someone outside our family was finally seeing the truth. A week later, Ms. Patel came to my house. I made sure everything was spotless and welcoming, even though I was incredibly nervous. She asked about my daily routine, my work, and how I planned to support the children if they returned to me. I showed her the little room I had set up for my children, decorated in their favorite colors and filled with books and toys I knew they would love. "I just want them to feel at home," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Ms. Patel didn't reveal much during the visit, but her kind smile as she left gave me a glimmer of hope. 2 weeks later, Ms. Patel filed her report with the court. My lawyer called me as soon as she received a copy. "It's good news," she said. "The investigator's findings are very favorable to your case." The report detailed numerous instances of my parents' alienating behavior. It highlighted their refusal to allow me access to my children, the negative comments they had made about me, and the detrimental effect this had on my children's emotional well-being. She also noted that my home was safe, stable, and fully prepared for the children's return. Ms. Patel recommended that the court grant me full custody with limited supervised visitation for my parents. Hearing those words felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to believe that this nightmare might actually come to an end. The final custody hearing was tense. My parents, flanked by their lawyer, seemed confident, as if they believed they could still manipulate the outcome. I tried to keep my composure, but the sight of my children sitting next to them, looking unsure and nervous, made my heart ache. My attorney presented Ms. Patel's report to the judge, highlighting the evidence of alienation and manipulation. She spoke passionately about my devotion to my children and my willingness to provide them with a stable and loving home. When it was my parents' turn to speak, they doubled down on their accusations. My mother claimed that I was too busy with my own life to be a good mother, while my father argued that they had rescued my children from an unstable environment. But the judge wasn't convinced. He questioned them about the report, especially the findings that they had intentionally interfered with my relationship with my children. Their answers were evasive and defensive, and it became clear that they had no real justification for their actions. Finally, the judge made his decision. He granted me full custody of my children, citing the harmful effects of my parents' behavior and their attempts to alienate the children from me. My parents were granted supervised visitation, but only under strict conditions. The judge's words hit my parents like a hammer. My mother's face turned pale, and my father looked as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Meanwhile, tears were streaming down my face not from sadness, but from relief. My children were coming home. While the custody battle was over, the legal repercussions for my parents were just beginning. The court found their actions to be not only manipulative, but legally abusive. Filing false claims, withholding the children, and attempting to alienate them from me were serious offenses. They were sentenced to 2 years in prison for their actions, a decision that shocked even me. I didn't want it to come to this, but the court was clear: their behavior was unacceptable and there had to be accountability. When I told my children about the outcome, I kept it simple. "Grandma and Grandpa made some bad choices," I said gently. "Now they have to face the consequences. But you're home with me, and that's what matters." My children seemed to understand in their own way. They clung to me tightly, and for the first time in months, I felt like we were truly a family again. After all we'd been through, life was finally starting to feel normal again. My children and I settled into our routines, slowly rebuilding the trust and connection that had been strained by months of separation. There were moments of adjustment at first. My daughter would occasionally ask about my parents, wondering why they couldn't visit. My son, quieter and more reserved, would sometimes get anxious if I left the room for too long. But I reassured them every chance I got, reminding them that they were safe, that I wasn't going anywhere. In time, those wounds began to heal. I threw myself into being the best mom I could be, balancing work and family while making sure my children knew they were my top priority. I found joy in the little things: reading bedtime stories, cooking dinner together, even helping with school projects. As for my parents, I struggled to reconcile my feelings for them. They were in prison now, paying the price for their actions, and while part of me felt vindicated, another part of me mourned the loss of the people I had once trusted. But life has a way of moving on, even when you're not sure how to let go of the past. About a year after the custody battle, I met a new man. He was kind, patient, and understanding, and most importantly, he adored my children. At first I was cautious. I didn't want to disrupt the stability we had worked so hard to build. But over time, he became a source of support and comfort for all of us. One night, as we sat together after dinner, my daughter climbed onto his lap and said, "You make Mommy smile a lot." I couldn't help but laugh, and tears came to my eyes. For the first time in a long time, I felt like we were finally moving toward a brighter future. My husband, the children's father, remained distant, uninterested in their lives. At first it hurt, but over time I realized it was a blessing in disguise. He had made his choice, and I had made mine. Now, surrounded by my children and a renewed sense of hope, I knew we would be okay.